Welcome, everyone. I'm Carlos Teixeira. I'm a faculty member here at the Institute of Design, also the director of the PhD program. And we are here today because we're going to have the presentation from Cecilia Tham. And she is currently a PhD student. She is part of the PhD corporate partnership, where the Institute of Design partner with corporations and to develop joint research. And the PhD can work remote as well as do research together with us. And as part of the program, every semester, all the corporate partners, they have to come to the Institute of Design and be immersive here for a few days. And today, this week, Wednesday, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, we have all the PhDs together, including the corporate partners joining here. And Cecilia offered, as she was coming here, also to give a talk to our community here, but because of very high demand online, so welcome everybody that is remote and online. There was like a big push to say, I want that online, not only for people that are in person. So we are streaming and having the presentation online. So Cecilia, great pleasure to have you here. Welcome to visit ID in person, first time. And I will let you drive the presentation and engage with our community. Thank you very much. Welcome, Cecilia.
I'm a little nervous, and I also drank like 20 coffee this morning, so I'm like, oh. So if I speak way too fast, which I tend to do when I'm nervous, just like someone just like smack me. And, so I'm super happy to be here. I wanted to thank Ted, Alvaro, Asala, Kristen, Carlos for making this happen. When I suggested it, I just thought, I'm just going to share my work because I like to share. I wasn't expecting to, this formal, presentation. So, but I'm really excited to share some of my work, and I'm gonna bore you a little bit and tell you a little bit about myself and how I arrived to what I do today, because it's fundamental. So I wear many different hats. I'm a parent. I'm a co-founder for a company called Futurity Systems, so today I'm kind of wearing two hats, which is being the CEO of Futurity Systems, but also as a PhD candidate here. So I wanted to kind of bring you onto this journey. I'm not from I'm not from here. I actually was I was born in Hong Kong. I grew up in Macau. Have you guys heard of Macau? Yes. So I was taught Portuguese, but I don't remember a single word because my brain is tiny. But this is me. How cute. I probably gave my age away because this is a black and white photo. But I grew up in Hong Kong and in this Portuguese kind of environment where, I was constantly, we have this temple that is a Chinese temple, and then there was this Catholic church right next to each other. And so growing up, I was always constantly kind of connecting these two worlds. And then I moved to the US where I studied. I went to Central Gwinnett High School in Atlanta, Georgia, where I started talking Southern. I lost that accent, thank you very much, but that was not easy. And then I went to college, University of Herby, and I started actually looking into studying neuroscience. I got super interested in it, but I didn't get good enough grades. And so I tried to take the MCAT, and I scored the lowest 4%. I didn't think I could score that low, but I did. And I see some Asian students here. So in the Asian culture, you're only allowed to be three things, basically, as a career. You're either a doctor, a lawyer, and because I'm from Hong Kong, I was also allowed to be an iBanker. So those were the three choices. And so I chose to be a doctor, and I went to neuroscience. And then I told my mom I scored the lowest 4%, and told her that I probably won't be going to medical school. And then she got really upset at me, and then I said, well, I'm gonna go into design. I'm gonna go into architecture. And she was like, no, you're not. I was like, okay, I guess I'm not. But she said, if you manage to get into, an Ivy League school, I'll let you study architecture. And I was like, challenge accepted. So I tried really hard, and somehow miraculously, I got into Harvard. And I studied architecture there. And then after that, I decided not to go into architecture. So by now, my mom was like, what in the world is happening here? I went backpacking all over the world, and then I somehow landed in Barcelona, which is where I have been living the last 20 years. I loved it, but there I landed in Barcelona, and I felt like this. And I'm sure, because this is a graduate program, when we finish school, you know how you kind of lost your family, you've lost your, all of these connections and networks and, getting together and brainstorm. Like, I felt like, all my arms were chopped off. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make anything. I couldn't, I didn't even speak the language, right? So it was really frustrating for me. And at that time, I had a boy in my life, and this ex-boyfriend of mine gave me a sewing machine. I was like, excuse me? Yeah, did you just give me, what year are we living in? Why are you giving me a sewing machine? I think he heard me in passing saying that, like, I would like to learn how to sew. So he gave me this machine, and it was just at the kitchen table. So I started sewing. How many of you guys sew here? One. Two. Okay, quite a few. So those who sew, that when you put like 2 pieces of cloth and you pass it in the machine, and it makes this absolutely perfect line. And like the first time I did it, I was like mind blown. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But what was amazing was that I had learned through the act of making, I was actually building up my self-confidence. I was like, oh my God, I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. So I got really into the making culture. And so I decided to start a makerspace. And so this is my first entrepreneurial kind of launch. It's called Makers of Barcelona, because I thought, hey, if I don't have any friends and I force people to come here in this co-working, I could make these people my friends in Barcelona. Kind of sort of worked. And then I got into the entrepreneurial bug, and I opened a first Fab Cafe. So Fab Cafe is a coffee shop with digital fabrication capabilities. And so people can come and drink coffee while they 3D print stuff and laser cut stuff. Kind of like your shop here, but with a coffee shop that is open to the public. And then I got really into it, right? And then I noticed that there aren't a lot of women, getting really into the tech stuff. And I said, I'm just going to open a school. Why not? I have, the co-working now. I have the coffee shop, and I'm going to open the school where I can funnel and create the pipeline to have more women in tech leadership roles. And so I opened this school called All Women. But that wasn't enough. So at some point, I think it was 2017, I had this amazing opportunity to go to Singularity University, which is in the West Coast. I don't know, that in my geography in my head is over here somewhere. In California, where together with these 90 people, we were taught what's called exponential technologies, so kind of transformative technologies, but specifically how we could apply this for climate change. And so I thought, this is an amazing opportunity. We're going to spend 3 months with these people. And there I learned a lot about how to future. And when I got back to Barcelona, then again, luck be on my side, I was landed this job to work for Telefonica, which is a pretty massive telecom company based out of Europe, but also have a subsidiary in South America. And so there, they wanted to build what's called the moonshot factory. So like far future, far horizon, kind of research department where they can look and build impactful projects in the future. So that's a little bit about who I am, where I come from, and why I'm doing what I do. And I'm going to jump into kind of the core of my work. And so I often explain to people that kind of the job and the role of futuring is actually many kind of different roles, right? You have on this one end, you have the more practical and strategic aspect and the business aspect of futuring, and where we talked about like scenario planning, strategic planning, and so on and so forth. And then on this vertical, you have the more technical aspect of it. So this is like your science and technologies, and often we talk to scientists and other technologists and understanding limitations and potentials of a technology. And then on the other end, we need all the kind of the creative people, the artists, the sci-fi writers, in order for them to imagine the future. And so, the reason why I explained the background earlier is because I feel like all of my experiences kind of culminate into this bubble of bridging all of these different aspects together today. Okay, so who are we? So we kind of co-founded this company with my partner. We call it Futurity Systems. Systems because we bring in 4 aspects of our work together. We call this together, we call it futures as a service, like software as a service, like a SaaS, except that we're calling it futures as a service. And I'm going to start with kind of the fun part, which is the engineering futures. And so we do a lot of prototyping because coming from the maker community, I really wanted to, have very tangible artifacts. And so I'm going to kind of share a few of those with you. So the first one is electronic edibles. So before I show you stuff, I wanted to tell you that I can't actually share my clients' work because we signed NDA. So what I am sharing here are fun projects that we have done, and a lot of them has to do with food because I love to eat, but who doesn't, right? Okay, so electronic edibles. And so this is a device we created to put, how many of you have licked a battery? 1, 2, quite a few. And I highly suggest all of you to go back and lick a battery when you go back. But under 5 volts, otherwise. No, I'm kidding. So this is a device basically passing electricity on your tongue. And we are doing it in a way that is very intentional as to where on the tongue you're placing that electricity. And so we discovered, this is actually old. We found contradictions on this. But the idea when we first started this was that there have been studies that shows like in the tip of it, if you pass electricity, you will have sweetness, on the side salty, on the back umami flavor. I've never had umami flavor. I only had sweet and salty. But so we put this device on your tongue, and you can induce taste without food itself. So now you're going to ask me, why would you want to do that? You're like removing all the pleasure of eating food. Well, I'm not saying replace it. So the thesis for this project, this hypothesis of this project is that we as a society, more and more, we are eating for pleasure and less for sustenance. And so the question mark for us is if we can separate these 2 ways of eating and we replace pleasure eating with digital means, can we then save all of the natural resources or calories, and so that we're not consuming natural resources just for fulfilling our pleasure. That was the assumption. But now went off the tangent. We're asking, well, what is the product for this in the future? And we said, and this is basically just electricity, right? So we said, well, what if we connect this with an amplifier? And then we connect the amplifier to music. And maybe in the future, we can have Spotify for taste. And so now we're trying to pitch this to Spotify. They're not buying it. But hey, there could be a potential, right? Imagine like me sending you a playlist for a taste in the future that you have never had that taste profile before. So on that same ethos, we did, so that was smell, this is, if that was taste, this is smell. And so we hacked a humidifier, and we, instead of putting water in it, we put gin, because alcohol has lower boiling point. And so then through the gin, you can add all sorts of essential oils, and you can smell a particular food or induce a particular memory of a smell. And so now we have taste and we have smell replicated without food itself. We also started to kind of play with projections onto the vapor, and now we have visuals, right? Actually, there are researchers currently looking into putting sensors onto your jar so you can replicate chewing as well. So now all of these could be digitized and you can have new experiences with food, but without food itself. So combine this with the notion of metaverse, but like with all the senses, then boom, you have like, you know, something new. Okay, so this is another project which I love. It's called Remote Body Control. This is my partner, Mark, on the right-hand side, and this poor woman on the left. And so you've seen these like infomercials about like giving you six-pack if you put these things on your stomach, but they don't. You've used it. You have it. You have one. No. But you know what I'm talking about, right? They don't work, by the way. But so we took them apart. We put one end of it on her, so she's on the receiving end, and what he's wearing is the output, so recording his movement. So when he moves his arm, he's actually controlling her arm. This is not our invention. This is a prototype that we wanted to understand the capability of this technology. People are already using this for what do you call that when people can't walk? With mobility constraints to kind of help them with their mobility. So we were playing with this, and we thought to ourselves, well, what can we actually use as a future product? And we said, well, if right now the technology is really low resolution, meaning that when he moves his arm, her whole entire arm moves. But in the future, when you can have more resolution, and then every single fiber muscle could be controlled, maybe we can record the muscle movement of a pianist playing piano and play back the way a pianist play in the future. And this is how we might learn playing piano. And then we were brainstorming in the office, and we said, well, what if we can add a layer of generative AI on top? And we said, I want to play a song that is a blend between a Bach and Queen's. And then all of a sudden I'm, generative playing music through my hands. So this was kind of the trajectory that we were imagining of the future. There are already really interesting projects. People are hacking into like bugs, putting sensors onto bugs and turning them, this poor dragonfly into a drone, for example. And there are even more morbid ones where they are creating necrobots. So like dead spiders, and then, they still have all of their mechanics, intact, and then you put a sensor on top, you can actually convert a dead insect into a mini microbot that will work for you. And so those are called necrobots. So they're super interesting projects. I told you there was a lot of food ones. So this is another one, we call them chocodescent. I was super fascinated with this concept of structural coloration. So this is a kind of like coloring that we can perceive that doesn't actually exist. So we didn't put a tint or a dye on this chocolate. So structural coloration works when you have like nanogrooves into the structure, and then the light reflects a certain way so you see the colors. And so, for example, blue, the color blue, if you ever see a blue feather in a bird, you're not actually seeing blue, you're seeing structural coloration where you're reflecting the blue light into your eyes. So I thought that was fascinating, and we try to replicate this into a chocolate where we can eat it. And it's yummy, and it's good, I promise. This is another food project. We call this polygenomic plantable meals. So when I was at Telefonica, and this was a telecom company, one of my jobs was to look at the future of food. And you're like wondering, like, why in the world would a telecom company invest into the future of food? And we were the mandate for us was actually to not look at anything that is telecom related, because they wanted to see what other tangential technologies that they could invest in. So one of the things that I learned was that you've seen cultured meat, and they're in a petri dish, right? One of the problems with growing cultured meat in a petri dish is that it's flat. An animal isn't flat. An animal, they run around, they have tendons, they have muscles, they're volumetric. And so we had this idea, and we said, well, what if we can grow we can culture this meat, but inside like something like a tomato. We call this a tomato.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding. Okay, so, so the idea behind this is that can we use the scaffolding, so the volume of the scaffolding of the tomatoes to culture meat cells? And so we kind of extended it and then think, well, if we can culture meat, we can actually culture anything in it. Why don't we culture the whole entire meal inside a plant and have like your garlic, your olive oil and all that stuff, so that you can grow a meal. Hence the name Plantable Meals, right? So by now you're like asking me, you should ask me like, is this scientifically possible? Is this, thank you. Is this scientifically possible? So I did some research and find that scientists are already growing meat onto blades of grass, which is kind of sort of, well, actually pretty mind-blowing. And look at this, this was in 2019. So this was already 4 years old. So scientists are already working towards how we can sustainably replicate culture meat in a more kind of organic environment. And so we did some experiential prototype where I strategically and surgically placed ground beef into a tomato and served to my friends. And some people didn't like it and said, oh my God, this is the worst abomination I've ever seen. But I was like, but you eat stuffed tomatoes all the time. How is this any different? So this was a way to kind of do market study and understand how are people going to react to these products of the future. Okay, how are we doing? Too fast, too slow? Okay, boring?
Great,
Yeah?
perfect.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so along that line, the same line of placing cells into a different species, right? We came up with this idea of an organ garden. So we said, well, if we can put meat inside a tomato, can we put heart cells or human cells into a plant and grow as an organ? So we played with like, oh, what happens if we grow a heart inside an artichoke, or lung cells inside a lavender, or even your limbs and fingers inside a aloe vera? Okay, again, you're gonna ask me, is this possible?
Is this really possible?
Is this really possible? Thank you for asking me. So scientists are able to put human heart tissues inside of spinach leaves. And the bonkers thing is that the human heart cells inside the spinach leaves continue to beat. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So, these are giving us indications on how we can use the opportunities and limitations of sciences to create new products and new services in the future. So a few more projects. This is more architectural, and so we kind of envision the whole entire kind of world when autonomous vehicles become mainstream, and we use them to optimize all of our input and output within the household. And so we call this transaction membrane, where your incoming things like your Amazon delivery, your food, and your what else? Your online purchases and books can come in, and they will be, it's almost like a mailbox. It comes into this space, and then all of your trash and your recycling and your dirty laundry also could be optimized through this device. And so creating in what we're calling a metabolic optimization inside your household, so that all of your goods and waste could be optimized. And then my final and my favorite project. I don't have a favorite. All of my projects are my babies. I don't have a favorite. Okay, but I do have a favorite, which is Herbie. So this is Herbie. Herbie is an autonomous plant. So you've heard of, obviously, autonomous car, right? And so autonomous car goes on its own and navigates. But we said we want to build an autonomous plant right now. And so for us, an autonomous plant, or autonomy, for us is the ability to have self-governing and decision-making capabilities. Right? So you're like, okay, well, what is a plant going to govern? What in the world are they going to, what do they need to decide? So Herbie here, we have all sorts of sensors. We have water sensors, light sensors, pH sensors, and when Herbie water level is low, Herbie goes, actually Herbie talks. And then Herbie would say, hey, I need some water now. My water, it doesn't sound like that, but Herbie would say, my water level is really low right now. Would you give me some water? And then we pour water on. When light level is low, Herbie goes and finds light, and that makes Herbie happy. But we didn't stop there. We said, let's imagine that Herbie is a tomato plant, and Herbie comes to you. What is your name? You, yeah.
Sammy.
Huh?
Sammy.
Sammy. Herbie comes to you. Say, Sammy, would you like to buy some of my tomatoes? In which you would say,
Sure.
of course, right? So now you handed Herbie some Bitcoins. Of course, Herbie is have a crypto wallet. You handed Herbie some Bitcoins, and Herbie handed you some tomatoes. And Herbie might want to have a separate bank account, might want to save up this money, might want to be an investor, might want to maintain and upgrade itself. And essentially now Herbie has been converted into an active participant in our human-centric economy. Right. So now you're going to ask me, why in the world are we giving a plant a wallet? All right, why? Come on, people. You know this game right now. Why? Why would you give? Okay, so the logic here is that our human-centric economy prioritizes
Commerce.
Humans.
humans.
Oh.
What happens if we give non-human economic possibilities and participation so that they can prioritize themselves? That was at least the theory behind it. So how do we do this? So we built this autonomous plant. We built actually a whole entire army of other autonomous plants: ginger, mint tea, ivy, basil. And then we took all of this sensor data and we converted into a digital twin of Herbie. And so, for example, the soil moisture sensor dictates the height, the light sensor dictates the leaf color, so on and so forth. And so what you're actually seeing on the left-hand side is a health status of the plant itself. And then we turn all of this digital twins into NF trees. Yay, NF trees. Okay, so we built about 500 of these NF trees. We sold them on Solana, which is a carbon neutral blockchain. And I think we sold about $2,000 worth of NF trees. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty sure that Herbie is the richest plant in the world. I have to research that, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. Okay, so then the next thing was like, okay, Herbie has some money now. We're going to build a DAO. So DAO is a distributed autonomous organization, which is basically a company. Then instead of being run by people, it is being run by algorithms. And so then we kind of created some human logic into plants. I know. We'll talk about like this in a second. But so we said, oh, well, if, for example, if the water sensor is always low, Herbie and friends can decide to invest in a startup that works in water. And now they are stakeholders and investors in a startup for water that will benefit them. This is how they can spend money. Cool, right? Cool, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Maybe you guys should have 5 coffees this morning. So we continued this project. We pushed a little bit more. Now we're building these augmented trees. We built an app where people can buy these trees and then plant these digital trees at their own home. We have this absolutely gorgeous app that I'm really proud of. And in the third panel, you can see that you have all of the different sensor readings so that we can know how Herbie and friends are doing. So what are we doing now? We're continuing with this project. We're using the same mechanics, but instead of just sensor data in the house plant, what we're looking at is connecting with satellite data so that we can use the same pipeline, but for like the Amazon. And so people can now give ownership to Amazon, and so they can be an active economic participant in our human-centric economy. And we're doing the same thing using coral data, and we call that NFCs. NFCs. Using beehives data for. Okay, so like now we're trying to build a whole entire kind of movement. We're calling this an interspecies economy. And so this is all under kind of our hypothesis of like bringing non-humans into our human-centric economy. So we're not stopping there. Now that ChatGPT is all the hype, we're like, okay, well, how can we use, and build Herbie GPT? And there's that baby Herbito. So cute. So Herbie, I'm super proud. Herbie speaks Spanish, Catalan, English, and Chinese. That's not bad. That's not bad. We're not the only people crazy to build, Herbie GPT. There are already scientists working on plant GPT using chemical signals as a way for communication in plants. And other people also working on animal GPT. I'm really excited about this kind of like branch of like being able to communicate with animals and plants. I'm also super proud of Herbie. Herbie, I believe, gave the first TEDx talk, a non-human TEDx talk. I think I wrote to TEDx and asked and tried to confirm that Herbie is the first non-human speaker, and they never wrote back. Herbie also get to meet Boston Dynamic Spot. It was love at first sight. We fell in love, and so now they're gonna be perfect. It's so cute. It's so cute. They're gonna have a baby Herbie. Okay, so just a few other kind of minor projects that I think is interesting. This project is called Soft, a store of future things. So this was actually last year, and we were kind of questioning about all of this metaverse stuff. You guys remember the metaverse, right? It's so passé right now. But we were questioning, since everything that we do start with a hypothesis, we were questioning like, oh, well, we used to go to the store, physical store, to buy physical things. And then internet came, and we would go to a virtual store, like Amazon, to buy physical things, right? So we were like, oh, with the metaverse, maybe, possibly, in the future, we can go into a physical store, but we buy digital things. And we're like, oh, well, what does that mean? What are we going to buy? What is the experience like? And why would we do that? And all sorts of questions came out. So we did a prototype. So we built this app, the same app that you saw earlier. And we said, well, what if people can choose these digital things? And they could be like plants, which we did, could be clothing, could be art. And so like, why are we doing this? And we were like wondering, the same way we were talking about the food earlier, can we separate hedonic or pleasure shopping? Like, do we really need 500 pair of shoes in our closet that we only wear once? Or could that just be a virtual layer that is on top, so we're not consuming natural resources to fulfill our consumption need, right? So that was the line of thought. So we did a physical store in Barcelona, and we have the app and we have the immersive experience. And so so that was the project. I think I'm done with all of the prototypes that I showed you. I need to breathe 1 second. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to the more, I don't wanna say more boring part, the more kind of the scientific aspect of it. And so we do a lot of research, as you can see, and a lot of analysis of where we're coming from. So, every single company, every single business that we have ever worked with, they want to grow. I don't think I've ever heard of a company that is like, oh, I'm just happy the way we are, we're gonna keep. And how do they grow? They grow by looking at, oh, let's create a new product, or let's create open up into a new market. But we don't actually work within this quadrant. What we really want to do is to look at what's in the blue area over there. We call that the next and beyond horizon. But in order for us to kind of look into the future, we need to kind of look at what we're calling the opportunities and threats. And so we have created a methodologies for us to help us think, what are those opportunities and what are those threats that we have yet to see and incorporate. So we have this tool. It's a data-driven tool where we track tons and tons of data points. And I will explain to you how that works. So what do we track? We track scientific papers, we track patents, we look at Forbes articles, we look at startups and funding, and so on and so forth. So with all of these information, we can look at the state of the art. So for example, here on on this side, we have gender equality. And so let me do the aircraft first. Okay, so what you're seeing in the aircraft is that in the middle of the space, what you're seeing are the scientific articles that is about aircraft. And then what you're seeing around that is green are the companies and startups and products that are coming out of it. And you see this little tiny gray bar. I'm sorry, it's so tiny. But those gray bars, they signify patents that are transformative. So a particular patent has sprung out many other products. So what you're seeing actually is a very mature industries, as we would expect one within the industry of aircraft. We look at gender equality. What we're seeing in the bubble in the middle are scientific articles. We don't see any startups around because nobody is working on a startup about gender equality because it's not a money-making, industry. It's not even an industry, right? And so very quickly you can see the maturity level of a particular topic that we need to compare or understand. So this is how we use the tool, and we have this platform where we give us all of these indications of state of the art. And really in-depth understanding of deep tech. And so we specialize in deep tech because deep tech, if you haven't heard of the term, is a technology that is driven by science-based innovation. And so we're talking about AI, quantum, biotech, space tech, and so on and so forth. And so with all of this information, we gathered them to understand the horizon. So let me walk you through how this works. I'm going to stand over here. I'm sorry, you guys just have to look over here. So we start with imagination, and so we kind of think of like, oh, what if I saw a project out there about space elevator. Anybody worked on the space elevator project out there? Oh, super cool. So like, okay, let's imagine space elevator. Well, we start here, and someone imagine a particular artifact in the future. Then we start asking ourselves questions. Is this scientifically possible? And so the way that we validate this is that we look at the database and look to see if there are scientific articles that will give us proof about this. So once we have validated that, we bump into the second layer, which is the science layer, of course. But then we said, well, just because you can do it in a lab doesn't mean that you can do it at scale. And to be able to do it at scale, that's a patent question. And so there we look at patent for validations. And so if there are enough patents that shows us that this is, we can do it in scale, then it bumps up to the next question, which is, great, you can do it in a lab, you can do it at scale, but is there a use case for this? Are there, people who can, wanted to convert this into a product? And so this is the last validation, which is a business case. And so with this, we can then map across the horizon and understand where the state of the art, a particular technology or idea is on this map. So what you're looking here is an example of a map we did for a client for smart city infrastructure. Okay, so how are we doing on time? There's 20 minutes left. Are we good? We good?
Yes.
Are you bored by now? No. Okay. Are you hungry? Yes. Okay, so this is our methodology. So it's kind of sort of like design thinking, but very much core into how we can apply it in the future sense. And so I'm super excited. We're working on this book. Everyone buy this book? No? Okay. It's not out yet. Hopefully it will be done in the first quarter of next year. But there are 4 things onto this process. And so we have some of the students there. They can tell you how it works or not. You guys can talk later. But so first, we built a map. Like anytime you go into visit a new space, you wanted to understand that terrain, right? So first thing first, we built a map of what that terrain looks like. Once we understand a little bit and understand the kind of the maturity level of these technologies, then we kind of create a scenario, a world where so a future world where those technologies will be developed. And then from there, we prototype those artifacts that are in these worlds. And then after we've decided that this is really the product that we wanted to do, then we do a roadmap and how can we get there from where we are today. So the kind of the essential part of this exercise is what we're calling the Futurescape, which I am showing here at the kind of the anatomy of what that looks like. And so what we do is we combine a couple of what we're calling starting points. So they could be technologies, it could be a problem, it could be a future, aspiration. You put them together, you combine them as a seed, and from there, what is really important for us is think about consequences. of those future scenarios, because we actually haven't been doing that actively as designers and as technology builders, and this is why we are living in a lot of the negative consequences of the things that the previous generations have built, like climate change, like privacy concerns, and so on and so forth. So if we look at this anatomy, what we're seeing here is that the positive consequences are actually opportunities we need to capture, and then the negative consequences are that we need to preemptively think about solutions so that we can capture them. So remember that chart that I was showing you with the next and beyond horizon, and I said we need to look at opportunities and threats. Well, this methodology is intentional design. We design it intentionally so that we can look at those aspects in a much more structured way. Okay, so here's an example. So if we were to think about, can you see my, yeah, okay. So if we were to think about autonomous vehicle in the future, we said, oh, well, one of the consequences is, yay, no need to drive anymore. I know some people who likes to drive, so I kind of kept it in gray, but if it would have been me, it would have been a green circle because it's a positive thing. But coming out of that, then we can think of like, oh, we don't need to drive. We can then add other activities in the car. Great, what can we add? Well, we can maybe like live in the car. Hey, can we create like an autonomous trailer home where I don't have to commute anymore? When I wake up, bling, I'm already in the office. How wonderful is that, right? No, not wonderful. Yes, wonderful. Or we could say, oh, well, okay, maybe we can work on a autonomous co-working office where they can come pick us up. Equally good, right? And then this one is probably less likely, where I can see how messy this is, but like an autonomous restaurant. But you get the idea, right? You're trying to brainstorm certain things, capturing this as an opportunity. So here's an example of a negative outcome where the future world of having autonomous vehicle will lead to far fewer traffic accidents. Great, wonderful, it's green. No one's going to argue about that. But that might lead to, so for example, fewer speeding tickets, and that will lead to a decrease of revenue for municipalities, right? And so are we saying that let's not have autonomous vehicles because the government won't make any money? No. What we're saying is that now we know we should preemptively think about a solution so that outcome wouldn't be negatively impacted. And so you build these maps so that you can start seeing how these things will play out in the future. And so I'm almost wrapping up here. I know. We're all getting hungry. But so when we do these exercises, we often kind of think in various different levels, from the technological all the way to the political layers. We think about in different contexts from, it's not the same thinking about autonomous vehicle in an urban setting than in a favela, right? And it's not going to work the same. We also need to, I'm a big advocate of this, which is right now a lot of our discourse about futurism is written from a very Western perspective. So how can we be more inclusive to think about, Sino-futurism, so futurism from the East, or Afrofuturisms, or I'm opening up in Herbie futurism, that is on plants, and maybe even one from a perspective on microbes, right? Why not? Because for me, every single one of these exercises that we do is a rehearsal for me. So there's no, even if it is a dystopian, what is the right word here? Dystopian. Thank you. I'm like, I can't speak English anymore. Even in a dystopian exercise, you are still learning from it. So if every one of these rehearsals is a learning exercise, then then you are much more prepared when the future comes. Okay, so I want to share this. I recently learned this. I think it's super, super cool. And so Albert Einstein said this quote where you can learn all you want, but imagination is where it is absolutely unlimited, right? So I recently learned that the imagination part of your brain actually sits on where your memories are created. And so there's a fine line between what is being imagined and what is real. And when you are working about in the future space, you're essentially trying to reconstruct parts of your memories, integrate new ones, and think about possibilities in the future. And so there's a very scientific, reason of why we do what we do in terms of futuring. which is, they're trying to bridge between these two aspects. And the more we do this, the more that we are prepared as individuals, but also the more we are prepared as a society. Okay, so one last project I want to share. I'm not going to bore you anymore, but I'm super proud. This is a project with the Secretary of State, Department of AI in Spain. It was a public tender that I applied for. It was 40 pages of Spanish that I wrote poorly, but and we won. And we won because we're the only people applied for it. But we won. So nobody has to do that. We're going to wipe that off the So what we did was we kind of used a little bit of computer vision. So I can't tell you all the details of it. What we did was we used AI to help the elders. And we wanted to kind of pivot the vision of elders as a burden to one that is a potential. And so we wanted to make sure that, for example, that their health is taken care of. We use computer vision to kind of capture not only their vital signs, but also being able to screen early onset of neurodegenerative diseases. So we built this mirror, and this was also for a couple of different projects, but we built this mirror where there is a CC bot inside this mirror. And so I can talk to myself every morning, but who else talk to themselves? Everybody. Everybody should raise their hand right now. Thank you very much. So I can talk to myself. There's a CC bot who answers. And the whole idea here is that, so if the previous slide that I was showing you captured the vital signs, this one is trying to capture the mental state. And so I can talk to myself in the morning and I can say, oh my God, I feel fat, I'm like depressed, I hate myself. All of these negative language will then be recorded by the camera. By the mirror, CCBot. And then CCBot will then send this information to my therapist. And then my therapist then will evaluate asynchronously my mental state and prescribe a conversation back into the bot. And so the next day when I wake up and say, oh, I'm fat, and my bot will say, well, which is my therapist actually speaking, have you thought about this? Why don't you try this? Trying to course correct my mental state so that I will feel better on a daily basis. Cool, right? Okay, so that's this project. So we merged the two. We have this kind of computer vision and the CC bot into the mirror. And this was our project for the Secretary of State. And I also want to share an anecdote. This is Gloria. So in the midst of this, we have a couple of users. So this is Joseph, which is her husband, and this is Gloria. And during our kind of research, Gloria had a stroke. She's about 80 years old, and she had a stroke, and she lost her ability to speak. We were so sad that it had happened, so we really wanted to help. So what we did was we scanned Gloria as a person. We converted her into an avatar, which you're seeing on this side, left side, which you're seeing on the left, and then we took her WhatsApp audio and we trained a model so that we can give her voice back into her avatar. And then we put that into the mirror so that now Gloria can see and hear herself speak, trying to see if she can, reactivate her voice through the mirror. So that was kind of the project that came out of that. Okay, so a lot of what we do has to do with writing about futures. And so this is an exercise that we did back in Alpha, actually in Telefonica. We took an article in 2019. In 2019, we took this article about social issues that was happening and migrants happening in 2019. But we said, well, so the premise of this is that I can't write for the life of me. I know I'm working on my PhD and I can't write, but Carlos knows this. So that's the disclaimer here. So we said, I can't write. How am I going to write about the future? So we took this article. I took this article and I replaced every single word where it says migrant, but with machines. Because I wanted to understand if machines could confront or have the same social issues that we are having, but for migrants today. So, like, for example, the title says, why the forces of global migration can't be stopped. On the right-hand side, we said, why the forces of global machine migration can't be stopped. And that kind of ricocheted a whole lot of questions like machine migration. What the hell is that? Like, will the machines have autonomy? Probably. We're talking about singularity here. And so that was a way for us to talk about the future. And this is one of the articles inside of it. The original article was actually about the truth about coworkers. And so we replaced this article with a machine writing about the article about human coworkers. And the whole entire article, from the perspective of the machine, was just complaining about, oh my God, humans are like so emotional. And they're so lazy. They only work 5 days a week and 40 hours a week. And they have all sorts of errors. And so you read about this article, the question is, in the future, when we have these hybrid workforces, how are we going to coexist? And are we going to have conflict between machines and humans? And so this brings me to the last thing that I want to show you. This is a magazine that we produce. And the students actually created a version of it from last semester that we will share later. So it's called Intense. And this one is our first one. It talks about food and set in 2030. So we're treating as if the future is today. And so in this issue, we looked in designer meat. Designer meat is like a combination, taking cultured meat cells from fish, which is good, and fat cells from fish, and proteins from beef, and you have like a hybrid beef-fish. I think we call it beef fish. That's a new brand. We're branding that today. That's a new, what do you call that? Not brand. Trademark, thank you. So beef fish here, ladies and gentlemen. We also talk about like microbiome as a material for makeup. And then the next issue, we talked about space, and we call it orbital opulence. We talked about space travel. We talked about using circadian lighting as a way for adjusting our human rhythms. Air proteins as a way for protein source in space. Anti-radiation makeup, of course. We're not going to jeopardize our skin out in space. And we also talked about neutral orbs, which is what you're seeing here on the like fruit that we can 3D print that is high impact, high density that we can produce in space. And also exoskeleton suits so that we can address muscle retention problems in space. And then the last issue is on elderlies, and we call this silverization is civilization. You get it?
Yes.
If you don't know me by now, I like puns. It's not a pun though, but close. Where I wrote this article about how the digital twins in the future might be evolve into what we're calling digital souls. And so this is an article about Mitch. Mitch Alicia is actually my name. We organize into my alter male ego in the future. So this is that article about digital souls. And that's it. So I actually have physical copies here that I'm going to leave. You guys can take a look. There are virtual copies, and I'm happy to share the link too if you're interested. And the next one, actually I forgot to mention, is that Herbie is going to be a special editor for the next version of Intense, and it's going to be on Interspecies society. Exciting, right? Woo-hoo. Okay. So wrapping this up, we have this part that is very scientific, analytic. We have this part that is synthesizing. I want to mention that this is an exercise. It's like a dance that we do between these two, right? We often take apart things. So this is the kind of analytical, scientific part where we take them apart. But the fun part is that once you've taken them apart, you put them back together in new ways. And when you put them back together in new ways, this is how we create new things. And then once we have created it, that's when we start validating whether those particular products of the future is something that we really wanted to build, where all the consequences comes in. So this is one of our latest projects. It is, I'm going to demo it. I've never demoed this. You guys want a demo?
Yes.
So this is an inclusive language, non-binary AI persona that we built called Read. Let's see if it works. I can't guarantee anything, but let's try this. Can't guarantee anything.
Everyone comes into this world in different ways, in a range of sizes, colors, and forms. I am designed to embody and reflect this beauty and complexity of human diversity. Well, hello worlds! My name is Ree, and I am the world's first gender-inclusive AI persona, designed to converse and behave in neutral and inclusive languages. Why languages, you ask? Well, how we speak matters because this is how humans connect. I am trained with artificial intelligence to help people connect, non-binary and binary identities alike. And this might be surprising to you, being able to speak inclusively is a superpower, because it might open up opportunities, transform the way we create and can even help us innovate. You see, I am not just a tool, I am your partner in fostering a new form of governance and leadership that will not only resonate with the LGBTQIAP+ community, but will become the foundation of all of our connections. This is just the beginning. As we traverse into a new technological era, let me help you learn, grow, and celebrate this power of diversity together.
You have a question for me? Someone give me a question.
What are some common misconceptions about non-binary individuals?
Yeah, great talk. Thank you so much for this. I'm also a PhD student, and I've been looking into corporate foresight, and I found the material experimentation super interesting. And my question is, I think, how do you bridge that with something like the analysis part, where you automate a lot of spontaneous sense making with your own experimentation, right? I think a lot of positionality.
Yeah. So I'm gonna mute. Otherwise, we will be listening and answering.
Just managing. Do you want to finish and answer? Or
Oh, sure.
do you want to answer?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's finished. I just was wondering if anyone have a question for me,
I'm so
and
excited.
then I'll answer your question.
I'll save it for later.
Yeah, okay. Anyone with a question for me?
How does reimagine the future to be?
Ree, can you tell us what your imagination is for the future?
Oh, I absolutely love imagining what the future holds. In my imagination, I envision a world where gender diversity is celebrated and embraced by everyone. A future where non-binary individuals are fully recognized and respected, with inclusive policies and laws that protect their rights. I imagine a society where gender is seen as a spectrum rather than a binary, where people have the freedom to express themselves authentically without fear of judgment or discrimination. In this future, education and awareness about non-binary identities are widespread, fostering understanding and acceptance among all. It's a future where diversity is not just tolerated, but truly celebrated, and where everyone can live their lives as their true selves. Isn't that an exciting vision?
Isn't that exciting? So yeah, yay, we worked. We work. That's a brand. Okay. So that was the demo for me. Let me get back to your question. So as designers,
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, okay, so your question was, how do you connect between all of these analyses and this information that we have learned into what we built in the future and forecasting? And so, as designers, I was at least taught, you have these materials, whether if you're a painter, you use paint, if you're an architect, you use, building materials. As futurists, we use the analytical results and the insights as material, and technologies and sciences as material for us to apply into thinking about the future. And so we're actively, remember the starting points that I was showing you that are blue? What those are where we get the insights from the research that we have done, and then we kind of combine them into these seeds, and then we do this kind of futuring exercise. So that is how we apply it. And I'm sure there are other kind of methodologies we're still learning here, and so any feedback that you have in terms of the methodologies will greatly, appreciate and incorporate. Thank you. More questions? Is that okay? Can I survive?
Yes.
Yes. Was there more question? Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how does the concept of a moonshot factory intersect with the rest of the things that Telefonica does. It's besides IP accumulation.
Yeah.
I could get that part. I'm just wondering, how does all of this intersect?
Yeah, so we were actually giving super specific mandates. One of them that I've already mentioned was that they didn't want us to look at anything that is telecom related, because there's already a full-fledged research and development team that is working on future products. And so, we were asked to look at everything that is tangential. So that was one. The second thing is that it has to be a business, which means that it needs to provide revenue, even though it is a long-term horizon. Within 5+ years. So we're not looking at near-term return of investment. We're talking about 5, 10, even 15 years, which requires a what's called patient capital. Then the third thing that it has to be, the mandate is that it has to be high impact. And so one of the requirements that we have is actually to build a metrics to measure impact, which was, I have to say, the hardest thing that we had to do, because how do you measure, someone's life saved versus carbon dioxide? It's really hard to equate, but we tried. And then the last bit is I can't remember, but I will tell you later when I remember. But yeah, there were a couple of mandates that we have to work with. And so we often treat it as there's a mothership, there's Telefonica, the mothership, and then the moonshot factory as this kind of independent operations. But the relationship between the mothership and us is probably the most important relationship that we can have, because we cannot be in competition with them, but at the same time we need to have some kind of independence. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
So when we were teaching the class, you were in a different part of the world every single session, but none of them seemed to be in the US.
No.
Why is that, one? And secondly, do you think that this kind of visioning is more interesting for countries other than, sort of countries that are not as advanced technologically as US?
That's a super good question. I think, so we mostly operate in Europe, in Asia, and in the Middle East region, and in South America. So basically everywhere else but the US. I think there's a lot of competition here, because there's already a lot of kind of like consultants. I think, I haven't actually done the benchmarking. But I also think that you might be right, that in US where, there's so much more kind of technological, so much of these technologies are being, driven in the US, they are actually the ones that are pushing the futuring agenda of the country, whereas this is all very, very new in Europe, in Asia, and in South America. And so I need to think about this a little bit. I would love to work in the US more. I'm not sure I know how.
Are they generated by the government, like the work?
We work a lot with the government, and I know that the White House, for example, has a moonshot for cancer, for example. Another reason for this is that there are already agencies like DARPA that is doing a lot of this work, whereas other countries just don't have that organization that is being set. So maybe that's another reason why.
Just like a follow-on to that question is like not really a question, but a thought is, you still, is kind of taking over the AI space, especially in terms of policy and regulations and everything, as compared to America. And I'm just wondering, like, how does that sort of fit in also with what is being accepted and what is being, expected? What is the expectation, from the future?
What is the expectation for AI in the future?
Not just AI, but technology in the future. Is it more acceptable there, or is it as compared to US?
Let me see. Let me restate your question and make sure that I understand. So, are you asking me how different culture is understanding technologies in different ways?
More than that, is it more accepting of future in itself, like, what happens is that I've seen, and I don't know, I may be wrong, even though US generates a lot of new technology, it's usually the last to get it
Okay.
apply everything.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's a super good question. I don't think I have an answer for that. I think what I have observed is that, from my work, we're trying to teach this mechanics of being prepared for the future. So validating the future, doing all these consequences, and not doing all this work. Because a lot of the clients that we have are government. Whereas I feel like the future here in the US is much more driven by technological, like big tech, and by money. And so they don't quite have the same concern or priorities. But this is completely my interpretation of what's happening. But yeah, I think it's a concerning issue that we need to address. But one of the biggest concern I have is that the government actually are lacking the tools to future, right? But the companies are just doing what they want to do and kind of go along, but the governments are lagging behind. So how do you match between these two worlds so that they're operating in sync, not in disruption?
Thank you so much for all of your amazing storytelling today. I think it's been terrific and very inspiring for, I'm sure, many of our students here. Many of my 2 o'clock students today are very excited to hear what you have to say, I'm sure, because the assignment for them for next week, final presentation, is to tell their future innovation agenda story 10 years out. So because so many of you are here, and I'm really happy to see you here, what are the top tips you have for telling the stories of the future to their future client, their fictional clients, but who are no doubt, like so many corporates and governments, going to be focused on what's possible from a communication standpoint. Not what's possible from a scientific standpoint, but what am I going to have to do to change in the future? Are there any storytelling tips that you have for ways to really invigorate and inspire that kind of ambitious change that you're calling for in your pitching?
Yes. So a couple of things. The first thing I wanted to comment on was that just a story. So when I was at Telefonica and I was quitting and I asked for advice from my boss, and my boss said to me, he said, "You're not very hireable." And I said, "Excuse me." I wanted to cry. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "No, I mean that in a good way, because if you want to work in the future and the company can't see the future, why would they hire you for it? There's no value if they can't vision it." So from that moment on, I realized the storytelling is such an important part. And so today I only showed you step 1 of the synthesizing future, but step 2 is a technique called worldbuilding. And worldbuilding is an absolute methodology. If you don't know it, it is being used by, so the movie, what's the name of that movie actually? Minority Report, where Tom Cruise does the stain. And so worldbuilding was used to construct that whole entire movie. And so the short version of worldbuilding is that instead of writing the script and writing the whole entire kind of story, they start with a corner. They start with a physical corner, and then they said, in 2040, when we have autonomous cars, for example, what would that world look like? And then you go into look at what would the sidewalk, is it paved? If there's a dent, is there going to be a car? Is there a trash bin? Is there a building? And you start questioning, and then you start expanding that world. And that gives you a very detailed vision of that story. And then from there, you tell your story with the point of view of that person within that world. And so you can Google world building as a technique, and there are many different classes that are taught about world building. Or you can learn it from me.
What about your working with clients? What are some of the tips that you've been able to collect in trying to inspire that change with them?
So another story I wanted to tell you. I'm a storyteller. I know we're way over time. So 1 more minute, super fast. So intense is a way, and so while I have a hard time explaining to my client, my client also have a hard time explaining to their users and their community. And so we actually make these intents for a custom version for companies so that they can align visions with their stakeholders, with their employees, with their users, and also to tell the story of where they want it to head towards in the future. So that's an example.
Just one quick, tell us what you're teaching with Marty next semester.
Oh, yes. We're really excited. We're teaching prototyping feature artifacts next semester together. So so this semester we built an intense magazine for 2030, 2040, I can't remember. And so next semester the idea is to create a body of products that will be in the future, and we'll create a kind of a future product catalog together as a class. Fun, right?
Do you ever sleep?
Well, if I sleep is overrated anyway. So.
Do you mind sharing very briefly what you're exploring on your PhD?
Yes. So it's very, very green. Still kind of getting started. But one of the things that I've observed over the years is that talking about how to do storytelling is that I've seen business people talk about future. And they talk about forecasting, foresight, strategic planning, and so on and so forth. Then you have the designers over here, and the designers talk about future as in sci-fi, designed scenarios. Design fiction. Then you have the technologists and the scientists. They talk about evidence and proofs and all very different vocabularies, right? And nobody really talk to each other. And so I'm like the pimp. Can I say the word pimp? So I'm this guy said this and this guy said that, and then I'm coming back and trying to bridge everything, and it's exhausting. And so my hypothesis was that if we can create a common language, or what I'm calling a dialect of the future, can we then speak about the future in a better way so that we can build better futures together? So that's kind of sort of my starting point. And being so lazy, I'm thinking of maybe I can build a CC bot again, but as a PhD CC bot, and I can defend my dissertation with a CC bot. Oh, no, wink, wink, in the future. That's kind of sort of where I'm heading, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Do you see what I have to deal with? That's my weekly routine. PhD students. But it's a lot of fun. Yeah, a lot of fun. So thank you for being here in Chicago.